My name is Sandip Soli. I'm an attorney with the Real Property Law Group. I'm a hospitality attorney, and one of my duties is to serve on the advisory network for the Washington Restaurant Association and the Washington Lodging Association. With respect to the ADA, and the law keeps changing as to interpretation and new ways to deal with it, but the top few issues are, one, you need to make sure your restaurant is compliant with table height, with restroom issues, which are numerous in terms of getting into the restroom, having enough space for the wheelchair to go around in a restroom stall, heights of sinks, heights of many things in the restroom. Back to the front of the house, you'll need to deal with table height and arrangement of chairs. You'll also have to make sure that most of the restaurant, if not the entire restaurant, is compliant, and that comes with different territories, whether it's local city ordinance, whether it's state law, or whether it's federal ADA. And so there'll be some analysis as to how much of the restaurant needs to be ADA compliant as opposed to a portion of it. For example, we've run into situations where the city required the entire space to be ADA compliant, and so even if you had a little landing, the city required the restaurant owner to install a lift to be able to get to the entire restaurant. So those are issues you definitely want to be aware of when you either buy a restaurant or you're building out a new restaurant, whether to make sure you can afford all those ADA requirements. Another issue, for example, is the service counter. If you were at a cafe versus a full-service restaurant, and how you have access to, for example, getting your coffee and writing the bill or paying for the item. And then with respect to hospitality in general, for example, with hotels, we've had lots of questions about pool lifts and being ADA compliant with pool lifts, which is a regulation that went into effect recently to make sure folks who can't just go down a ladder or go down steps have some accessibility to pools in hotels. Non-compliance could lead to litigation, meaning a lawsuit. Anyone who comes into your place of what we call public accommodation, whether it's a restaurant or a hotel, it's deemed a public accommodation. It's not a private facility, even though it might be privately owned or privately leased. If anyone from the public can enter it, it has to be ADA compliant, at least in that area of the business. And so if you're not ADA compliant, someone could bring a lawsuit against you and not only receive some amount of damages for whatever harm they've been caused because they weren't able to fully access your premises, but as well as legal fees and expenses in pursuing that lawsuit. So it could be a very heavy penalty if you're found not in compliance. The best way to deal with that is, if a customer complains, to deal with it right away, immediately, make up for the issue, just like you see with respect to airlines and hotels. I mean, they'll comp the room, they'll comp the ticket, they'll comp the meal. You need to deal with that right away because you don't want to face that lawsuit and the legal expenses that go with it. With respect to service animals, the laws vary from state to state, but Washington law is very specific as to what constitutes a service animal. Primarily, it's dogs that are trained for those that are, hard of seeing, having sight issues. But as we all know, there's issues beyond that service animals can provide, such as comfort, psychological, mental health as well, and so that needs to be respected. Certainly there's some analysis that goes into whether or not a certain animal meets the service animal standard under Washington law, and so we'd have to look at that on a case-by-case basis to determine that. But the brightest line is definitely, as we traditionally know of, is the service animal, the dog usually, that helps someone with sight impaired issues to get around. You can certainly ask the person if it's a service animal. More likely than not, the response is probably going to be that it is, and then you'll probably have to seek legal counsel to confirm the same if it's still an issue for you. Obviously, if the person says no, then you have the right to enforce your restaurant policies or hotel policies to ask the person to otherwise leave or keep the animal outside.